The rain came down in sheets that cold November evening. George stood outside the iron gates of Buckingham Palace, soaked to the bone. His hands gripped the wet metal bars. His knuckles were white. He had been standing there for nearly 20 minutes. People walked past him with umbrellas. Tourists took photos. No one seemed to notice the desperation in his eyes. George was 17 years old, thin, tired. His jacket was too small and torn at the shoulder. His shoes had holes in them. But none of that mattered right now. What mattered was the envelope in his pocket, the envelope his mother left him. Before she disappeared, inside was a photograph that changed everything. It showed his mother, younger, standing right here at these gates. She was smiling. She wore a uniform. Behind her stood someone George recognized from history books, someone important. On the back of the photo, his mother had written only 3 words: "I served here." George had grown up believing his mother was a hotel maid. She cleaned rooms. She worked long hours. She never talked about her past. She never mentioned royalty or palaces or anything like that. But 2 weeks ago, she vanished. No note. No explanation. Just gone. The police said she left on her own. They found no signs of struggle. Her bank account showed a large withdrawal. They told George to wait, that she would come back. But George knew something was wrong. And then he found the envelope hidden in her closet. Now he stood at the palace gates in the pouring rain. A guard stood just beyond the gate, tall, stoic, red uniform, black hat. The kind of guard tourists love to photograph. The kind who never moved, never spoke. George took a breath. He stepped closer. "Excuse me," he called out. The guard did not move. His eyes stayed forward. "Please," George said louder. "I need help. My mother worked here. Her name is Catherine Miller. I need to know if anyone remembers her." Still nothing. "She disappeared 2 weeks ago," George continued. His voice cracked. "I found this photo. She was here. She served here. Someone must know something." The rain pounded harder. Water ran down George's face. He could not tell if he was crying. Before you continue with this story, if you're enjoying it, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories like this to life. The guard's eyes shifted. Just slightly. It was so small that George almost missed it. "Please," George whispered. "I just want to know what happened to my mother." The guard's jaw tightened. His gaze returned forward. But then, so quietly that George almost did not hear it, the guard spoke. "Go to the East Service entrance. Wait there. Someone will meet you." George's heart pounded. "When?" "30 minutes. Come alone." The guard said nothing more. His face returned to stone. George stepped back from the gate. His hands shook. He looked down at the photograph in his hand. His mother's smile looked back at him through the rain-soaked paper. 30 minutes. Someone knew something. Someone was willing to talk. George turned and walked along the palace wall. The rain continued to fall. The city lights blurred around him. He had no idea what he was walking into. But he had to know. He had to find out what his mother had been hiding all these years, and why it had made her disappear. The East Service entrance was tucked away from the main gates. No tourists, no crowds. Just a small door in the high stone wall. George stood beneath a street lamp. The rain had softened to a drizzle. His clothes clung to his skin. He checked his phone. 28 minutes had passed. His stomach twisted with anxiety. What if this was a mistake? What if no one came? What if the guard had been playing some cruel joke? But then the door opened. A woman stepped out. She was older, maybe 60. She wore a dark coat and a scarf wrapped tight around her neck. Her face was stern but not unkind. She looked left, then right, then directly at George. "You're Catherine's boy?" she said. It was not a question. George nodded. "You knew my mother? Come inside. Quickly." She held the door open. George hesitated for only a second before stepping through. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud. They were in a narrow corridor. Dim lights. stone walls. It smelled old, important. The woman walked fast. George followed. "My name is Margaret," she said without turning around. "I worked with your mother for 5 years. We were both in service here." "Service?" George asked. "Like housekeeping." Margaret stopped. She turned to face him. Her eyes were sharp. "Your mother was not a maid, George. She was a lady-in-waiting." The words hit George like a punch. "What?" "She attended 2 members of the royal household. It's a position of great trust, great responsibility. Your mother was exceptional at it." George's mind raced. His mother, royal household. It made no sense. Then why did she leave? Why did she tell me she cleaned hotels? Margaret's face softened. Because she had to disappear. She had no choice. They reached a small room. Margaret opened the door and gestured for George to enter. Inside was a wooden table, 2 chairs, a single lamp. On the table sat a file folder. Margaret closed the door. She sat down and motioned for George to do the same. "What I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room," she said. "Do you understand?" George nodded. His heart hammered in his chest. Margaret opened the folder. Inside were documents, photographs, papers with official seals. 17 years ago, your mother witnessed something," Margaret began. "Something she was never supposed to see. A conversation, an exchange, between 2 very powerful people." "What kind of exchange?" "The kind that could ruin reputations, end careers, destroy families." Margaret pulled out a photograph. It showed 2 men in suits standing in a palace hallway. George did not recognize them. "Your mother was in the wrong place at the wrong time," Margaret continued. "She heard things, saw things, and when they realized she had been there, they panicked." "Who are they?" "People with connections, people who could make problems disappear." George felt cold. "Did they hurt her?" "No. But they made it very clear what would happen if she ever spoke about what she knew. They told her to leave, to vanish, to never come back. And they told her that if she ever returned or made contact with anyone from the palace, there would be consequences." George's hands clenched into fists. "So she ran." "She lied to me my whole life." "She protected you," Margaret said firmly. "Everything she did was to keep you safe." "Then why is she gone now? Why did she disappear 2 weeks ago?" Margaret's face darkened. "Because someone found her. Someone who wants to make sure her silence is permanent." The room felt smaller. The air felt thicker. "Where is she?" George demanded. "Is she alive?" "I don't know," Margaret admitted. "But I know she was frightened. She contacted me 3 weeks ago. She said someone had been following her, watching her. She said she needed to disappear again." This time deeper. George stood up. His chair scraped against the floor. "Then I need to find her. I need to help her." "George, you don't understand what you're dealing with." "These people, I don't care who they are," George interrupted. His voice was loud now, angry. "I'm not going to just let her vanish because some powerful people want her quiet." Margaret stared at him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she reached into the folder and pulled out a piece of paper. An address. "This is where she was staying before she disappeared. It's not much, but it's a start." George took the paper. His hands trembled. "Why are you helping me?" he asked. Margaret's eyes glistened. "Because your mother was my friend, and because no one should have to live in fear for doing nothing wrong." George looked down at the address. He had a lead. He had a chance, and he was not going to stop until he found her. The address led to a boarding house in South London. The kind of place where people stayed when they did not want to be found. Peeling paint, broken windows, a front door that did not lock properly. George arrived just after midnight. The streets were empty. A single streetlight flickered overhead. He stood outside for a moment, staring up at the building. His mother had been here recently. He pushed the door open and stepped inside. The hallway smelled like mold and cigarette smoke. Stairs creaked under his weight. He climbed to the 2nd floor. Room 12. That was what Margaret had written on the paper. George knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Louder this time. Still nothing. He tried the doorknob. It turned, the door opened. The room was small. A single bed. A table. A chair. The window was covered with a thin curtain. Moonlight filtered through. George stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The room looked like someone had left in a hurry. The bed was unmade. Clothes were scattered on the floor. A suitcase lay open, but mostly empty. George moved to the table. There were papers, bills, a notebook. He picked up the notebook and opened it. His mother's handwriting filled the pages. Notes, names, dates. It was frantic, desperate. 1. Name appeared over and over. Victor Hargrove. George did not recognize it, but his mother had underlined it multiple times. She had written dangerous next to it. And on the last page, she had written something that made George's blood run cold.
Eyes.
If anything happens to me, find Victor. He knows the truth. He has proof. George tore the page out and stuffed it in his pocket. He kept searching. Under the bed, in the closet, behind the curtain. Then he found it. A phone, taped to the back of the headboard. Old. A burner phone. George turned it on. The battery was almost dead. The screen flickered to life. There were no contacts saved, but there was one text message. Sent the day his mother disappeared. They know where I am. I have to run. Don't look for me. Stay safe. I love you. George's throat tightened. His vision blurred. She had tried to protect him even in her last moment here, but he was not going to stay safe. He was going to find her. He pocketed the phone and turned to leave. But then he heard something. Footsteps. In the hallway. Slow. Deliberate, George. The footsteps stopped outside the door. A shadow moved under the doorframe. George's heart raced. He looked around the room. No other exit. Just the window. He moved toward it as quietly as he could. The doorknob turned. George grabbed the window latch and pulled. It would not budge. Stuck, painted shut. The door opened. A man stepped inside. Tall, broad shoulders. Dark suit. His face was emotionless, cold. You must be George, the man said. His voice was calm. To calm, George said nothing. His back pressed against the window. You've been asking questions, the man continued. Talking to people you shouldn't be talking to. Who are you? Someone who's been cleaning up your mother's mess for a very long time. The man took a step closer. Where is she? George demanded. Safe. For now. As long as you stop looking, I'm not going to stop. The man smiled. It did not reach his eyes. Then you're going to end up just like her? Disappeared? Forgotten. A problem that no longer exists.
Ouch.
George's hands balled into fists. Fear and anger battled inside him. What did she see? George asked, What is so important that you've been chasing her for 17 years? The man's smile faded. The kind of secret that powerful people will do anything to protect. The kind of secret that costs lives. Tell me no. The man reached into his jacket. George's heart stopped. He thought the man was reaching for a weapon, but instead, he pulled out a photograph. He held it up. It was his mother. Recent. She was sitting in a chair. Her hands were bound. Her face was bruised. Her eyes were terrified. She's alive, the man said, but she won't stay that way if you keep digging. Walk away, George. Forget you ever found that envelope. Forget the palace. Forget Margaret. Forget your mother. Never. The man's expression hardened. Then you've made your choice. He turned and walked toward the door. He paused at the threshold and looked back. You have 24 hours? After that, we come for you. And when we do, no one will find you either. The man left. The door closed. George stood frozen. His breath came in short gasps. The photograph was still in the man's hand. But the image was burned into George's. Mind, his mother was alive. She was hurt. She was being held somewhere, and George had 24 hours to find her before they came for him too. He grabbed the notebook and the phone and ran. George ran through the dark streets. His lungs burned. His legs ached. But he did not stop. He needed to find Victor Hargrove. He needed answers. He ducked into an all-night cafe and collapsed into a booth in the back corner. His hands shook as he pulled out the notebook and the burner phone. The phone's battery was dying. Maybe 10% left? He opened the notebook again and scanned the pages. His mother's notes were scattered, frantic, but there was a pattern. Victor Hargrove's name appeared alongside another word, archivist. George grabbed his own phone and searched. Victor Hargrove, archivist. London. One result came up. A small article from 8 years ago. Victor Hargrove had been a royal archivist. He worked in the palace records department. He managed historical documents, correspondence, private papers, but he had been fired. The article did not say why, just that he had been relieved of his duties under confidential circumstances. George kept searching. He found an old address, a flat in Camden. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. He paid for a coffee he did not drink and left. The flat was in a rundown building near the canal. George climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor. Number 17. He knocked. No answer. He knocked again. Harder. A voice came from inside. Rough. Suspicious. Who is it? My name is George Miller. My mother is Catherine Miller. She told me to find you. Silence. Then the sound of locks turning. 3 of them. The door opened a crack. A chain held it in place. A man's face appeared in the gap. Gray hair, wrinkled skin, eyes that had seen too much. Catherine's boy? The man whispered, yes. The chain rattled. The door opened. Victor Hargrove stepped aside and gestured for George to enter quickly. The door closed and locked behind them. The flat was cluttered. Papers everywhere. Books stacked in towers. Filing cabinets lined the walls. It looked like a bunker for someone who lived in fear. I thought they got to you too, Victor said. He moved to the window and peeked through the blinds. When Catherine disappeared, I assumed that was it. They finally tied up all the loose ends. She's alive, George said. They have her. They showed me a photo. She's hurt. Victor's face went pale. He sat down heavily in a chair. God help us. You know what she saw? George said. It was not a question. You know what secret they're protecting? Victor nodded slowly. I know, because I helped hide it. He stood and walked to a filing cabinet. He pulled out a key from around his neck and unlocked the bottom drawer. Inside was a metal box. He lifted it out and placed it on the table. 17 years ago, I was responsible for archiving private correspondence, Victor began. Letters, memos, records that were meant to stay buried. One day, a letter came across my desk. It should never have been in that batch. Someone made a mistake. Someone put it in the wrong file. Victor opened the box. Inside were photocopies, documents, a letter with a royal seal. This letter, Victor continued, was written by someone very close to the royal family. It detailed a payment, a cover-up, an illegitimate child born to someone in a position of power, a child whose existence was denied, hidden, erased from all records. George stared at the documents. His mind raced. Your mother saw this letter, Victor said. She was in my office delivering files. She saw it on my desk before I could hide it. She read it. She understood what it meant. And they found out, George said quietly. Yes, within hours, people came. Powerful people. They demanded the letter. They demanded all copies. I gave them everything I had. But they did not believe me. They thought I had made duplicates. They thought your mother had taken photographs. They threatened us both. Did you? Make copies? Victor's eyes met George's. Yes. One. This one. Hidden for 17 years? Because I knew that one day the truth would need to come out. Who was the child? George asked. Victor hesitated. Someone who is now in a very powerful position. Someone whose entire life would collapse if this became public. Someone who has spent millions ensuring no one ever finds out. George felt the weight of it all. The enormity. The danger. "This is what they'll kill my mother for," he said. "This is what they'll kill me for." Yes. Then we use it. We expose them. We trade this for her life. Victor shook his head. It's not that simple. Even if you go public, they'll deny it. They'll destroy the evidence. They'll destroy you. And they'll still have your mother. Then what do I do? George's voice broke. How do I save her? Victor looked at the documents, then at George. Something shifted in his expression. A decision. There's one person who might help, Victor said. Someone with enough influence to stop this. Someone who knows the truth and has been living with the guilt for years. Who? Victor wrote a name on a piece of paper and handed it to George. George read it. His eyes widened. You're serious? Completely. But you need to move fast. And you need to be careful. If they find out you're going to this person, they'll stop you before you get close. George folded the paper and put it in his pocket. He looked at the documents in the box. Can I take these? Take photos. But leave the originals here. If something happens to you, I need proof that still exists. George pulled out his phone and photographed every page. Every document. Every word. When he finished, Victor walked him to the door. Your mother is brave, Victor said. She gave up everything to protect you. Don't let her sacrifice be for nothing. George nodded. His throat was tight. He left the flat and stepped into the cold night air. He had a name. He had evidence. He had a plan. But he only had hours left. And the clock was ticking. The name on the paper was Lady Eleanor Ashford. Former advisor to the royal household, now retired. Living in a countryside estate 2 hours from London, George could not afford a train ticket. He had no car. But he had desperation. And desperation made people resourceful. He hitchhiked. A truck driver took pity on him. George sat in silence as the truck rumbled through the dark countryside. Rain started again. Soft at first. Then heavy. By the time George reached the estate, dawn was breaking. The sky was gray and bruised. The estate sat behind tall hedges and iron gates. A long driveway led to a large stone house. Lights were on inside. George walked up to the gates. There was an intercom. He pressed the button. A voice crackled through. Female, older, yes. My name is George Miller. I need to speak with Lady Ashford. It's about Catherine Miller, and a letter from 17 years ago. A long pause. Wait there. 10 minutes passed. George stood in the rain. He was exhausted, soaked, running on nothing but adrenaline. Then the gates opened. A woman emerged from the house. She wore a long coat and carried an umbrella. She walked down the driveway toward George. As she got closer, he could see her face, lined with age, but strong, intelligent. She stopped a few feet away. Looked just like her, Lady Ashford said quietly. You knew my mother? I did. She was kind, honest, and she paid dearly for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. She's been taken, George said. They're holding her. They threaten to kill her if I keep looking. But I have proof of what she saw. I have the letter. The documents, everything. Lady Ashford's face did not change, but something flickered in her eyes. Fear, or maybe guilt. Come inside, she said. George followed her up the driveway and into the house. It was warm, elegant, filled with antiques and paintings. She led him to a sitting room with a fireplace. A fire burned low. She gestured for him to sit. He did. She sat across from him. Show me, she said. George pulled out his phone. He showed her the photos of the documents, the letter. The records Lady Ashford studied each one carefully. Her expression remained calm, but her hands trembled slightly. When she finished, she set the phone down. She looked at George. This letter destroyed lives, she said. Not just your mother's. Mine too. Why? Because I was the one who wrote it. George's breath caught. Lady Ashford stood and walked to the fireplace. She stared into the flames. 17 years ago, I was tasked with handling a delicate situation, she continued. A member of the royal household had a relationship. A child was born. The circumstances were complicated, scandalous. It could not be made public. So I was instructed to arrange everything quietly. Payments, adoption, silence. You helped cover it up, George said. I did what I was told. I documented everything in that letter. A record for those who needed to know. But it was supposed to be destroyed. Instead, it was misfiled. And your mother saw it, and you let them destroy her life. Lady Ashford turned to face him. Her eyes glistened. I had no choice. If I had spoken up, they would have destroyed me too. I was a coward. I have lived with that shame every single day. Then make it right, George said. His voice was firm. Help me save my mother. Use your influence. Stop them. It's not that simple. Yes, it is, George stood. You have connections. You have power. You can make a call. You can demand they release her. And if they refuse, we go public with everything. If we go public, people will be ruined. Families will be torn apart. My mother has been torn apart. George shouted. She spent 17 years hiding, running, terrified. She deserves justice. She deserves her life back. Lady Ashford closed her eyes. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she opened them. Something had changed. A decision made. You're right, she said quietly. I've been a coward long enough. What? She walked to a desk and picked up a phone. An old landline. She dialed a number from memory. Someone answered. George could not hear the other side of the conversation. This is Eleanor Ashford, she said. Her voice was cold now, commanding. I know you have Catherine Miller. I know what you've done, and I know why. But this ends now. You will release her unharmed, and you will leave her son alone. A pause. Then her voice grew sharper, because if you don't, I will go public with everything. The letter, the payments, the cover-up, every sordid detail, and I will name names, including yours. Another pause. Longer this time? You have 2 hours. Bring her to my estate. Alive? Or I go to the press. She hung up. George stared at her. Will they do it? They have no choice. The truth is more dangerous to them than your mother ever was. What if they don't believe you'll go public? Lady Ashford smiled grimly. Then they don't know me very well. She walked back to the fireplace. She looked at George. Your mother sacrificed everything to protect you. It's time someone sacrificed something to protect her. George felt tears sting his eyes. Relief, exhaustion, hope. Lady Ashford nodded. Now we wait. The 2 hours that followed were the longest of George's life. He sat in that chair. Lady Ashford paced by the window. Neither spoke much. Then, exactly 2 hours later, a car pulled up the driveway. Lady Ashford opened the front door. George stood behind her. The car stopped. The back door opened, and his mother stepped out. She looked weak, bruised, exhausted, but she was alive. George ran. He ran faster than he ever had. He reached her just as her knees buckled. He caught her. Held her, George, she sobbed. You shouldn't have come. You shouldn't have looked. I had to, he said. I couldn't lose you. She held him tighter. They sank to the ground together. The rain fell around them, but neither cared. Behind them, Lady Ashford stood in the doorway, watching, silent. For the first time in 17 years, she felt something close to peace. 3 weeks later, George and his mother sat in a small apartment in Edinburgh, far from London, far from the palace, far from the people who had hunted them. Lady Ashford had arranged everything. New identities. A safe place to live. Money to start over. She had kept her word, and in return, the documents remained hidden. The secret stayed buried. For now, Catherine was healing. The bruises were fading. The fear in her eyes was slowly being replaced by something else. Relief, gratitude, love for the son who had risked everything to find her. "I'm sorry I lied to you," she said one evening. They were sitting by the window. The Edinburgh skyline stretched out before them. "I thought I was protecting you by keeping you in the dark." "You were protecting me," George said. "You gave up your whole life for me. And you gave up your safety for me," she replied. "You're braver than I ever was. I learned it from you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Catherine spoke again. Her voice was softer now, more vulnerable. "There's something I never told you," she said, "about why I stayed at the palace as long as I did, why I was even there that day." George turned to look at her. "I was there because of your father," she said. George's breath caught. His father was something they never talked about. Catherine had always said he left before George was born, that he wanted nothing to do with them. "He worked at the palace too," Catherine continued. "Security. That's how we met. We fell in love. But when I got pregnant, everything changed. He wasn't who I thought he was. He had secrets, dangerous ones. And when I found out what he was involved in, I knew I had to leave." "What was he involved in?" Catherine hesitated. "The same cover-up? The same powerful people? He was part of the team that made sure the secret stayed hidden. When I saw that letter, when I realized what he was part of, I confronted him. And he told me to forget about it, to stay quiet. But I couldn't. So you left him." "For you? For us. He chose them over his own family." George felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger, sadness, but also understanding. "Do you know where he is now?" George asked. Catherine shook her head. "No, and I don't want to. That part of my life is over." George nodded. He understood. They sat together as the sun set over Edinburgh. The sky turned orange and pink. The city lights began to glow. "We're safe now," Catherine said quietly. "We can finally live." George agreed. But even as he said it, he thought about the documents, the photographs on his phone, the truth that was still hidden. One day, that truth might need to come out. One day, the people who had caused so much pain might need to be held accountable, but not today. Today. He was just a boy sitting with his mother, grateful she was alive, grateful they had each other. That was enough. For now, meanwhile, back in London, Lady Eleanor Ashford sat in her study, a glass of wine in her hand, a fire burning in the hearth. She thought about Catherine and George. She thought about the choices she had made, the cowardice, the guilt. But she also thought about the choice she had made 3 weeks ago. To finally do the right thing, it did not erase the past. It did not undo the harm. But it was something. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. A number she recognized. One of them, she let it ring. Then she stood, walked to the fireplace, and threw the phone into the flames. She was done being afraid. She was done protecting people who did not deserve protection. And if they came for her, she would be ready. Because some secrets were too dangerous to keep. Some truths were too important to bury. And some people were worth fighting for, even if it cost everything back in Edinburgh. Gosh, George opened his laptop. He looked at the photographs of the documents one more time. He thought about what Victor had said, about truth, about justice. Then he closed the laptop. Not yet, but someday, when the time was right. When it was safe, when it would matter, someday the truth would come out. And when it did, his mother's name would be cleared. Her sacrifice would be known, and the people who had destroyed her life would finally face consequences. But tonight, George just wanted to be with his mother. He walked to her room. She was asleep, peaceful, safe. He pulled a blanket over her shoulders and kissed her forehead. "I love you, Mom," he whispered. She smiled in her sleep. George turned off the light and closed the door. He walked to the window, looked out at the city. Somewhere out there, the world kept spinning. Secrets kept hiding. Power kept protecting itself. But here, in this small apartment, Two people who had lost everything had found each other again, and that was the most powerful thing of all. George smiled. They had survived. They had won, and no one could take that away from them. Not ever. The rain had stopped. The stars were coming out. And for the first time in 17 years, Catherine Miller could sleep without fear, because her son had given her the greatest gift of all, freedom and a future. Together,